This video contains spoilers for the Terminator and for the following films for comparative purposes. This video is a study of use of space and its relevance to the safety of a character on screen, with the main focus being on the Tech Noir scene in the Terminator. The Terminator is a 1984 sci-fi film directed by James Cameron. In a broader sense of genre, the film also includes heavy elements of action and horror. When discussing any element of a film, it is important to do so with the knowledge of what genre the film falls under. This is important because with different genres comes different traits. Most films will set up their world and its limitations quite early on in its narrative. In a drama such as Good Will Hunting, set in a very grounded reality, identical to our own, we would feel very shocked and cheated if by the end Will was flying around and smashing people into buildings. However, in Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, we are not surprised by this, due to the world that we were shown early on in the film. A film which uses its mise-en-scène in a specific way or for a specific purpose would also set up these associations early on and stick with these associations throughout. Here are some examples within the same genre or which share sub-genres with the Terminator. In Ridley Scott's Alien, condensed space has negative connotations. The dark and narrow corridors in which the alien stalks feel very claustrophobic. We are very aware that the crew is trapped in this enclosed space with an otherworldly predatory being. In contrast with this, Ripley escaping using the shuttle to the open space of outer space itself can be seen as a positive contrast to the closed space of the ship. Ripley essentially escapes into this space, leaving the ship behind, and even uses this space to finally kill the alien. The exact opposite can be seen in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. Open space is considered negative, and condensed space is considered positive. The first 3 minutes of the film are made up of a black screen with ominous music being played. The black screen can be seen to represent infinity, or indeed the infinity of outer space. From the very opening of the piece, we are being fed key information about the use of space in Kubrick's film. In several other scenes in the film, the same negative connections with open space can be seen. An example of this would be when David must fix the broken unit. The camera angles used here show just how small David seems contrasted with the infinite blackness, and how with a single mistake he could drift off into the nothingness. Again, this can be seen when Hal sends Frank hurling into space using one of the pods. The smaller space of the ship itself can be seen in a positive light, even though it is where Hal is situated. Even after Frank is killed, David wants to get back to the ship. Obviously to shut down Hal, but also because it's the preferable place to be. Although these two are great examples of films with strong use of space, it seems preferable to also use an example of a film that has a similar setting to the Terminator, this being Earth. A good example would be John Carpenter's Halloween. Far from being the first horror film, Halloween is well known as being one of the first slasher films. In this film, space and light within that space come into play. As we watch the film, we learn that the antagonist, Michael Myers, doesn't attack at daytime, something commonly used in horror films. We see him at certain points early on at daytime, but quickly learn our characters are safe in the daylight. Occupied space is also of interest in Halloween. Similarly to the alien in Alien, we learn that Michael won't attack groups of people and prefers to pick them off one by one. This adds great tension when a character is alone in a scene. These traits are not straight out rules and can be used to lull you into a false sense of security. An example of this would be when Lambert and Parker split off from Ripley. The audience would probably think that Ripley is the one who is in danger, however it turns out to be Lambert and Parker who are in danger. Ripley escaping the ship using the shuttle would also make the audience feel relieved, making the fact that the alien is on board the shuttle even more terrifying. How space will be used in the Terminator is also gradually set up, or more appropriately, taken away. Upon our introduction to the Terminator himself, we see him approach a group of 3 punks outside in open space, drinking and playing around with a telescope. He then proceeds to graphically murder one of them and then probably the other 2 off camera. What we learn from this is that the Terminator will attack in open space and will also attack groups of people. As the film progresses, we see the Terminator kill 4 separate people in confined space, 2 of which are at daytime. What we learn from all this is that there is essentially no safe space within the film. All of this is very important information which is built up and given to us in the first act, which helps to bring a lot more weight and tension to the scene where the Terminator and our protagonist Sarah Connor meet for the first time. At this point in the film, it is to be expected that the audience would be emotionally invested in and rooting for Sarah. She is a very likeable and friendly character. The audience would also likely feel sympathetic towards her as we get to see firsthand that things aren't going her way in her job and love life. This is important for mise-en-scène because if we don't care about the character in the first place, why would we care if they were in peril and how this was displayed to us on screen? The space in which this scene takes place is a bar called Tech Noir. Sarah pays and enters the club with no trouble. This is Sarah being accepted into the space. In contrast with this, the Terminator is challenged by the bouncer as he tries to enter. This is the moment the real tension for the audience begins. This is all due to what we have learned in previous scenes. The worry for the audience comes from the fact that we know that Sarah is not safe here, and in fact is probably not safe anywhere. The dramatic irony is that Sarah doesn't know what exactly she's hiding from. Costume is also important to this scene. The people who occupy the club are normal people who could in no way help Sarah. This is an important factor, as in the later scene in which the Terminator attacks the police station, the audience could be tricked into thinking that a space occupied by more capable people could be safe for Sarah, even though this has not turned out to be the case. Arguably the most important moment in this scene, from a thematic point of view, is when Sarah drops a bottle on the floor and leans down to pick it up. It is important to note that this is the first shot that both the Terminator and Sarah are in together, and as the Terminator enters the frame, Sarah exits the frame. This one shot sums up what the film is about. There isn't room for both of them to exist in the world, therefore Cameron has decided to show us this using the frame. This is followed by a moment of visual relief for the audience when Sarah looks up and sees Kyle. Even though she does not yet know he is there to protect her, the audience does. The framing of this shot shows bottles and other objects in the foreground. This represents obstruction and distance, as in the scenes to come the Terminator and other factors try to come between Kyle and Sarah. When the Terminator sees Sarah, he walks through the crowd of people with great ease. This contrasts very well with the struggle Kyle has once he realizes who the Terminator is. For the rest of the film, Kyle is going to have to fight harder and struggle more than the Terminator, and this is all shown in this one scene. The following gunfight is a battle for space. The way the Terminator is framed and the sheer size of Schwarzenegger himself shows dominance. This is achieved through low angles and in shots in which he fills the frame. Kyle, on the other hand, is being forced out of the frame, affirming the Terminator's dominance. We only get to see quick snippets of him peeking over counters and into the frame to take shots. This battle ends in a similar way to the one at the end of Halloween, with the antagonist being physically forced out of the occupied space and frame. Sarah and Kyle are then forced to flee the area and subsequently flee every other location they occupy due to the relentlessness of the Terminator. To conclude, use of space is yet another tool movie creators can use which is perfectly suited to the visual medium. A massive range of emotions can be conveyed to and brought out of an audience using these visuals without needing to rely heavily on sound or dialogue.